This Week in Startups is brought to you by Upstart, revolutionizing the process of personal lending. Checking your rate only takes 2 minutes and won't affect your credit at upstart.com/twist. And Squarespace. Check out squarespace.com for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, use offer code TWIST to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of This Week in Startups. Today, we're going to talk about solving one of the biggest problems society has today, the collapse of journalism. Journalism is screwed, as you know. Fake news is a phenomenon that our president has really leveraged to create fear, uncertainty, and doubt in our country. And journalism itself is dealing with budgets that are shrinking. So it's being derided by a president who likes to lie and fib and not tell the truth. And then journalism is out of money and has many self-inflicted wounds, from clickbaiting to not fact-checking, all because they're under-resourced and desperate. Yes, desperate to get clicks and views, which leads to perverse incentives for writers who get rewarded, in fact, for saying salacious stuff that's not true. Now, I'm painting with a broad brush here. Not all journalists participate in link baiting. Many of them hate link baiting. In fact, many of them will write a story and then have the editors at their publication, who are desperate to make ends meet and keep their jobs, put link baiting titles on their stories. You've probably had this phenomenon. You go to Business Insider or Huffington Post, you saw some link on social media, you click it, and the link has nothing to do with the reality of the situation. Journalism is at a crossroads. In fact, most would argue it's collapsing, and it's a desperate situation because journalists, of which I count myself as one in my previous career and now as a commentator who does random acts of journalism, I am dismayed, depressed, and perturbed by the state of journalism. I would like to see it get better. The only way it's going to get better, in my estimation, is if you, the listeners, shoot the locks off your damn wallets and pay. Because advertising itself can impact editorial. Now, it's not going to impact my editorial here on This Week in Startups because I don't need the money and because we've been sold out for 5 years. So when I read an ad, it's whitelisted, right? We picked that advertiser. We allowed them on the program. We don't allow e-cigarettes and nonsense. But I can tell you, other publications, they will do anything the sponsors ask them to do. Well, a couple of years ago, I heard about Die Correspondent in the Netherlands. Those are Dutch people.
That's correct.
In the Netherlands. We'll get into that in a minute. And I was reading that they had solved this problem back in 2013 when they set a world record for journalism crowdfunding. You're not going to believe this. Back in 2013, 5 years ago, they raised $1.7 million with 19,000 backers. Today, they've expanded to 60,000 paying members. And with the help of Nate Silver, Jimmy Wales, co-founder of the Wikipedia, Esther Dyson, who's been on the program, Jay Rosen, Clay Shirky, who I was his first publisher in the Silicon Valley Reporter when he did a column for us, Roseanne Cash, Craig Newmark, Omidyar Network, and others. They're going to bring the thecorrespondent.nl to the United States under thecorrespondent.com. The CEO and co-founder is Ernst-Jan Pfauth.
Excellent. Yes.
Did I get it right?
You got it right.
Ernst-Jan Pfauth, welcome to This Week in Startups. You heard my preamble.
I'm depressed now too, Jason.
It's okay. We'll get through it. But were you seeing the same problems in the Netherlands? Were you Dutch people in the Netherlands?
Yes.
Of which Amsterdam is the capital?
Capital, yes, that's correct.
People get this confused because they say, oh, Dutch, they must be from Dutchland.
Yeah,
but the Dutch
Germany,
are from the Netherlands.
Yeah, I also get Denmark a lot. They were part of Denmark.
People say that too.
Yeah.
But to be clear, the Netherlands is a country with 16, 17 million people.
Yeah, that's correct.
3 times as much as Sweden and Norway.
Yes.
7 million more than... no, Sweden's got 11 million. Denmark has 10. Denmark and Norway have 5 each. So
Yeah.
it's a pretty big country for that
Compared to
area.
Scandinavian countries, yes.
Yeah, to
Compared to this
Scandinavia.
country, not so
Smaller,
much.
and obviously smaller than what's going on in Germany. Obviously, 80 million Germans or 110 million German-speaking people in the world. Putting that as context, was journalism collapsing in the Netherlands, and that's why you created this? You saw some fundamental problem with journalism, or why did you create Correspondent.nl?
Yeah, so my co-founder, Rob Weinberg, the editor, and me were both working at a legacy newspaper, NRC Handelsblad. It's sort of like the New York Times of Holland. And we both saw a couple of problems. First one is advertising, because it's a weird business model for journalism, because journalism is about informing people, and so those people should be your most important stakeholders. But if you have advertisers, you're basically working for the advertisers, and it influences your business and editorial decisions. So that was one thing we saw.
Was it in that newspaper, the New York Times of the Netherlands? Did they have a porous wall between the advertising and content? Most of those high-end newspapers like to think there is no wall.
Yeah, so there was a Chinese wall, and but still, for example, there would be a new career section or a new travel section added to the newspaper. Not because the journalists wanted that to happen, or not because readers wanted it, but because it's easy to sell ads in those sections. So there's always, even though there's a wall, there's always this influence. So that's one problem that we saw. The other one is that the trust figures in the Netherlands, journalists are not trusted, basically. Only 1/3 of the people in the Netherlands trust journalists. So that leaves 2/3 of the country not trusting journalists, which is a huge problem. I mean, you can do fact checks and all that, but if 2/3 of the people doesn't believe what you say, then you're not achieving your mission. So at the newspaper we both worked, we tried to change journalism. We tried to redefine news, because news is always about the exception and never about the rule. So we wanted to cover structural developments. So instead of the weather, we wanted to cover the climate. And at the same time, we wanted to involve our readers in journalism and make them more important. And that went pretty well for a while. Then Rob, my co-founder, got fired. My project got killed. We were both on the streets, and
So you literally got kicked out of this. What was the name of the publication in the Netherlands?
NRC.
NRC?
Yeah.
NRC.
And then Handelsblad.
NRC Handelsblad.
Yeah.
They didn't want to embrace your radical, ad-free, consumer-first, reader-first philosophy, and they laid you guys off.
Yeah, I think a lot of people at the newspaper were interested in it, but the owners weren't. It was a private equity firm. They wanted to sell it after a couple of years, so they were only interested in short-term gains. And which is also a problem in journalism, I think.
We have this problem where private equity has gone and bought all these.
Yeah.
And then private equity's job, correct me if I'm wrong, is to look at the expenses and figure out a way to cut them dramatically, look at the revenues, and look at ways to goose them significantly, independent of the long-term ramifications of those two behaviors, so that they can sell it at a higher price than they bought it.
Yeah, and we see that happening in the US with local newspapers all over the country, right?
Yeah.
So we figured, now we're on the streets, we have all the time in our hands, let's try to build something new. And Rob wrote 10 founding principles for our new journalism outlet, that we were ad-free, for example, not focused on the news, would be working with readers, etc. And we published that, and we said, if we find 15,000 people who are willing to pay us 60 euros, which is around $70, for a year, then we have 900,000 euros, $1.2 million, and enough to get started. And to our astonishment, we made that goal after 8 days. So a lot of people were interested in a journalism outlet that is focused on readers instead of advertisers or owners.
And now you have 60,000 people paying yearly.
Yeah, around $80 a year. 60,000
people paying $80 per year.
Yep.
Which would be a budget of roughly 4 or 5 million US. Is that right?
Yeah, and we also sell a lot of books. We also publish books, so our revenue is close to $5 million in
US.
Yeah.
And how many full-time employees now work for Correspondent.nl?
52.
52.
Yeah.
Of those 52 employees, how many are actual journalists, writers, or editors?
21.
And the other 30 people do what?
So they are either editors or designers or developers, and they're all focused on the reader's needs. So there is not a sales department that sells ads, for example. Everyone is focused.
So you're including the editors in that?
Yeah.
So if you put writers and editors together, what would that be? In other words, people who directly prepare the content.
I think 30.
30.
Yeah.
So 60% of your team is involved in the actual writing of stories, polishing of stories, fact-checking, et cetera.
Yeah.
And then the other 40% build the platform.
Exactly. Yeah, but they also help with making infographics, for example. So that would also qualify as editorial.
Oh, yeah, that would count as editorial as well. All right, when we get back from this quick break, I want to know, what has the impact been on the quality of the journalism at your publication, Correspondent, versus the one you left, the New York Times of the Netherlands.
Yeah.
When we get back on This Week in Startups. Let me tell you about a great new service called Upstart. They will help you get your path to financial freedom. And I know that that path can look bleak when you have those high interest debt loans crushing you. And if your FICO score isn't great, it's going to get worse. Well, Upstart is revolutionizing the process of personal lending. They offer personal loans, but not like the ones from a bank or a credit union. No, they go beyond the traditional FICO score, and they assess your credit worthiness. How do they do this? They give you a loan based on potential rather than your history. So they will reward you based on your education and job history with a smarter interest rate. Quick. 2 minutes, you go online, zip, 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 and you find out your Upstart rate. Checking your Upstart rate is always free. You can do it in 2 minutes, and it's free. And most importantly, it's not going to affect your credit. Once the loan is approved, your funds will be transferred to you the next business day. 100,000 users have paid off their credit cards, funded a wedding, or made a large purchase. And the team from Upstart, it's a bunch of ex-Googlers, I found out. I was taking a look at the company. Really, really smart team over there. So here's your call to action. It's super simple. You just go to upstart.com/twist. Make sure you do that, upstart.com/twist, TWIST, so that they know that you came from this program, and you will find out how low your Upstart rate is. Checking your rate only takes 2 minutes. It does not affect your credit. I'm going to say it again. It will not affect your credit, and it only takes 2 minutes. That's upstart.com/twist. And here's a disclaimer. Loans are made by Cross River Bank and FDIC insured New Jersey state chartered commercial bank. Restrictions apply. Details at upstart.com/twist. Upstart.com/twist. Welcome to the family Upstart. Okay, let's get back to this amazing episode. Welcome back to This Week in Startups, where we're talking about, can journalism be saved? And is there a new model and a way to do high quality old school journalism without selling your soul? My guest is Ernst-Jan Pfauth. He is the co-founder and CEO of The Correspondent. You can visit the Dutch platform at dcorrespondent.nl. And you can visit the US version, which is not yet launched, at thecorrespondent.com. So over 5 years, you got to 60,000 paying people. Mm-hmm. These are subscribers.
Yeah, we call them members.
You call them members. So like NPR or PBS. You have members.
There's one big difference with subscribers, I think. A subscriber just pays you money and then you give them information in return. So it's like a neutral transaction.
Yeah.
Our members don't just contribute financially. We also ask them to share their knowledge and experience with us. So they basically join a community.
Got it. So explain to me this crowdsourced journalism. We thought crowdsourced journalism was going to be a thing. There was Oh My News, I believe, in Korea. You probably followed that project back in the 2007 period when Wikipedia was a big thing. Everybody thought, oh, let's crowdsource everything. Crowdsourcing does not result in a high quality product by default, correct? It typically results in a low quality product. Is that right?
Well, I'm not sure if that qualifies for everything, because I like to read Wikipedia and I think it's quite trustworthy and it's crowdsourced.
How do you know?
Well, if you
fact check it or you just assume?
Well, if I read topics that I know a lot about, I think they're pretty well written, and you have to use sources so you can check whether everything is correct. So I in general trust what I read on.
Do you have a bio of yourself on there?
I don't. Should I?
Right. Well, no, I think if you talk to people who have their own bios on there, what you'll find is they do not think that it's a fair site or that it's unbiased. It is well sourced, but what happens is the percentage that they put on negativity on bios of living persons, they call it the BLP problem.
All right.
So if you were Elon Musk, the shorts or people you fired would be more motivated to edit your page anonymously than the people who you have good relationships or were objective. So what people with bios of living persons, they generally feel like that platform is not super fair and balanced.
Yeah.
It's not balanced. So it could be truthful, but not balanced.
Right. What I think crowdsourcing needs is still some sort of hierarchy. So we have our journalists, we call them conversation leaders. So they are always in charge of the end product. They check everything, and everything our readers share is source material.
Got it.
But it's not the end product.
So how does that work? If you're going to do a story on climate and Trump leaving the climate accord, how is a reader going to help you?
So what we do is our correspondents all have their own beat. They don't have to follow the news. So our climate correspondent, for example, is now working on, he's been working on this for 2 years now, a big story about how oil companies relate themselves to climate change. So what he did a couple of years ago, he said, I want to research oil companies. If you work at Shell, which is a big Dutch oil company, please reach out to me because I want to talk with you about how you see Shell and yourself relating to climate change. So he wrote this call out. He basically shared the story idea with the whole world. And then around 20 people working at Shell reached out to him. He had coffee with them.
Anonymously or on the record?
Anonymously. He had coffee with them and he transcribed parts of those conversations. And he published that. And he showed people following him that he actually understood what was happening at Shell because he was talking to people at Shell. He wasn't talking to
How long did
PR
that
people.
story take for him to do?
Oh, I think before we got the first major story out of that research project, it took around 6 months, I think. But that was a story that basically proved that Shell knew about climate change since the 80s. They had their own Inconvenient Truth style documentary in 87. And our correspondent wouldn't have found that if he did not involve readers.
Wait. Those people who worked for Shell happen to be readers as well, because you have 60,000 readers. So it makes sense that some number would work at Shell, which is in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
And they reported, they leaked, they were leakers, whistleblowers, and they gave him a documentary that was done in-house on this?
Yeah. And that was a story that went globally. I mean, from the Washington Post and the Guardian covered it. And we could do that because we're open about our story ideas. And a lot of journalists traditionally are afraid of sharing their story ideas.
Why?
Because they think some colleague will run away with it. Whereas we have seen that as soon as you share this story idea, you claim it. It happened here as well. David Farnsworth of the Washington Post, who won a Pulitzer for his research into Donald Trump's philanthropy efforts. What he did, he was just calling all the foundations to hear whether they received money from Donald Trump. And he made photos of his notebook and shared them on Twitter. So he shared his story idea, he shared the process. As a result, thousands of Twitter followers started helping him out, started answering questions for him, reaching out to foundations too. And it got him a Pulitzer. So I think sharing your story ideas, being open to your audience, taking them seriously, and ask them for their help is a great way to have well-informed journalism.
Of your 21 journalists or 35 or so people on the editorial staff, how many come from that former New York Times, esque level company? Say the name of it one more time for me.
NRC.
NRC.
Yeah.
How many come from NRC? How many people jump shipped?
I think around 6, 7.
Okay, wow.
Yeah.
So 1 out of 6 people on your editorial team comes from there.
Yeah.
How do they compare, if I were to ask them, what was life like before and after making that NRC jump to the day correspondent? What would they say? So
NRC is doing something completely different. It's a newspaper in the classical sense. So it's covering the news, and it still has a print edition. So it's a different kind of journalism.
Sure.
We ignore the news. What that means for those
when you say you ignore the news, you ignore the of the moment. In this instance news, like the breaking news you ignore.
Yeah, we're not.
But you're going for the long-term coverage of the news and breaking investigative stories.
Exactly. We try to uncover structure. So we don't cover scandals about individuals, we try to look at the system and make that more visible. So what's different is they have completely editorial freedom. They don't have to listen to an editor telling them, today you're going to do this or that. You have to go to that press briefing, cover that, and come back with 500 words. They can decide what they want to write on. And editors are coaching them, helping them out. What is different is that they have to share their story ideas with readers. And we ask them to spend around 30 to 50% of their time on talking to their network, to their readers. So they're active in the comments, they're replying to comments, they're asking specific questions to readers. And they have this whole set of people who are helping them out, like infographic designers, developers.
So what would they say? They would say that this is 10 times better and I have more freedom and I'm doing more meaningful work?
I think they can follow their own agendas more. They don't have to follow the news agenda. They can set the agenda. And I think for a journalist, not all journalists, but for a lot of journalists, this is a great way to operate.
What does a journalist get paid working for you versus the previous company you worked at?
The same.
The same?
Yeah.
What does that equal in the Netherlands? 60, 70, 80,000 a year US?
Well, no, the salaries are quite different in the Netherlands because we have
40, 50, 60.
We have this big social system. So you
don't need to make as much because you get free
healthcare
and free time off if you have a baby.
Yeah, and the schools aren't that expensive and all that.
Got it.
So
40, 50,000 is what a journalist makes there, 60?
I think around 3,000 euros a month.
3,000 euros
a
month. Got it.
Yeah.
So that would be like 40, 50K.
On average.
Yeah, got it. So these people are not making a ton of money. They're doing it because they really want to be there and help the world.
Yeah.
There's other opportunities for them.
Yeah, I mean, that's what journalism is about, right? You want to uncover stories and you want to make a difference. And that's also, I think, a big difference. We, at a Correspondent, we try to look for solutions as well. So we practice constructive journalism or solutions journalism. We don't just.
What does it mean, solutions journalism?
We don't just want to describe what's wrong with the world. We also want to look for solutions. And so if we uncover something, if we see there's a problem in healthcare, for example, too much.
Or the Shell example.
Yeah, we are gonna look for examples. So for possible solutions.
What was the solution for Shell being a giant oil company that doesn't care about the environment?
Well, this correspondent is, for example, following activist shareholders who are trying to persuade Shell to become more sustainable. So that could be an example. Another thing we did is we researched the debt industry in the Netherlands. So people have a lot of debt because of the government. If you get a traffic fine and you don't pay it, in the end you could end up in prison. Around 1 million people in the Netherlands have those kind of debts. So when we uncovered that, we started writing a manifest about what we could do, what the government could do to change it. And we rallied up our members to start spreading this manifest, to start asking their political parties to make it part of their programs. So we're always looking for possible solutions to the problems we discovered.
So 6% of people in the Netherlands have a warrant out for their arrest because they owe the government money?
Well, no, they don't. They won't end up in jail, but they do have
some
big
debt
debts
to the government.
Yeah.
What was your solution? Forgive it?
No, yeah, that could be a solution, but also one of the biggest problems is that as soon as you've got a fine, for example, and you don't pay it, it really adds up really fast.
So some amnesty on the escalations or something?
Yeah, I don't know the exact specifics, but the correspondent who covers it obviously does. And
what's going on in the Netherlands that 6% of the people don't pay their fines?
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know. So you're planning on bringing this to the United States. Mm-hmm. You have a bunch of big names here. When we get back from this quick break, I want to understand what your strategy is for deploying this same concept in the United States when we get back on This Week in Startups. You know, we took the Launch Festival down to Sydney this year, and we wanted to make a completely new website, and I just thought to myself, this is going to be so easy. We're going to get the domain name launchfestivalsydney.com, and we're going to just turn it on squarespace.com. And in minutes, we had a gorgeous website. And everybody on the team was updating it. And we looked so professional so quickly to our partners in Sydney that when they saw the logos of all the partners, we were able to sell 5 other sponsorships. You heard me correctly. That beautiful website made all the partners say, I want my logo up there looking gorgeous on that Squarespace website. And we were able to sell 5 more sponsorships. That's money in our bank because, and giving us the ability to run this event because we had such a beautiful website. Think about it. If you were going to sponsor an event or do business with a company or hire a consultant, if their website looks janky and ugly and it doesn't work on mobile, it's not responsive, it's not a gorgeous template, and it doesn't stay up and running and it's not fast and secure, you look like an idiot. And then people don't do business with you. But the converse is also true. If you use a beautiful Squarespace website and it has all those great features and it's optimized for mobile and it's fast and you can choose one of those over 200 extensions, well, you know what? They're going to find you and they're going to want to do business with you because your website is tight. Tight is right, and Squarespace will make a beautiful website for you. Of course, they have 24/7 award-winning customer support, and of course, they have search engine optimization analytics built in. It just works. It's flawless, and a great website is a worthy investment of your time, even as CEO. Even as the co-founder, you need to go look at your website right now and think to yourself, if I didn't know this company, I landed on this page through an email link or a tweet or a Facebook posting or randomly through a Google search, would you be impressed? If you're not impressed, you're doing it wrong and you're losing customers. Go to squarespace.com for a free trial and use the offer code TWIST when you're ready to launch, and they'll give you 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Thanks again to my friends at Squarespace. It is an invaluable tool. We love it. Go check out Launch Festival Sydney. You'll see a beautiful website. Boom. Go check out angel.university, founder.university, jasonsyndicate.com. I could go on and on about all the different websites we've created, but I would run out of time and we got to get back to this amazing episode. So thanks again, Squarespace. Use that offer code TWIST, get that 10% off. I know you don't need the 10% off, but use it so they know. And get ready to have a beautiful, beautiful website today, like right now. Go do it. Okay, let's get back to this amazing episode. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to This Week in Startups. I'm your host, Jason Calacanis. You can follow me on Twitter. It's at Jason, or Instagram at Jason. You can email me, jason@calacanis.com. And insert begging for reviews on iTunes here. You guys know what to do. Please give us some reviews. We're desperate. We're not desperate. You think advertising is evil when combined with journalism?
Definitely, yes.
Definitely evil, hands down. Yeah. Are you like an anarchist or are you like a socialist? How would you describe the political bent of yourself and the leadership of the Correspondent?
Well, so I think advertising is evil because you want to serve the readers. You're in journalism for the readers. So You don't want a different stakeholder than your readers. And if you're open about that and transparent about that, and you tell readers, look, we want to really inform you. We don't want to attract your attention for ad dollar's sake. We want to really inform you, and we need your financial contribution. Then we've noticed that people are willing to do that. They're willing to pay $80 a year to be part of a community. So that's why I think advertising is evil.
So if Shell came to you and said, we loved what you did, we want to create the Shell endowment for exceptional journalism, and we want to give you $1 million grant a year for the next 5 years. You can spend it however you want. There's no strings attached. Would you do it or not?
No way, because it's a sponsor deal. So it's advertising.
Got it. So you wouldn't believe them if they said there's no strings attached?
Yeah, why would they do that? Right?
I mean, because of the value of the ad space and that people might view it and
it's just PR marketing. So if they gave us $1 million, we'd be dependent on them.
Got it.
So if
have people done that? Have advertisers come to you and say, hey, I know you don't take advertising, but could we sponsor you or partner with you in some way?
Yeah, we've got requests for sponsorships or for grants from companies. And we always said no, and we always say no.
Well, the fact that you have 60,000 people paying $80 on average means no one person impacts the editorial, correct?
That's correct, yeah.
If you piss off 10% of your user base, the impact on your business is what?
Then it would have a big impact, of course, because we would lose around 10% of our membership revenue.
But it wouldn't be a death blow.
No, it wouldn't be a death blow. And we're always...
So you're, in fact, independent to a certain extent off of any contingent within your membership as well. because there's such small dollar amounts.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're doubly insulated. It's not like people can go, oh, you know what? You're anti-Trump. 30% of us are pro-Trump. We're just going to pull the plug on this.
Yeah, that hasn't happened.
Yeah, can't happen. You want to come to the United States and try this madness out here.
Yeah, we want to publish.
I'm being joking when I say madness because there are subscription-based publications here.
Of course.
The Information launched here with a $400 a year subscription.
Yeah.
Wall Street Journal makes a ton of subscriptions, I think more than they do on advertising.
Yeah, and the New York Times is also doing quite well in that perspective.
Let me ask you a silly question. The New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, they seem to not be focused on paid subscriptions. They let people go visit the site for free, and it was like optional to pay.
Yeah,
you could get in
5 articles you have to pay.
Now you do.
Yeah.
But they've gotten a little bit tighter about it. Why do you think they're now focused on subscriptions as opposed to doing it 10 years ago?
Well, I can read their minds, but I do see, of course, that the online advertising business is dwindling, and a lot of the money
but people are
for
spending,
newspapers.
For newspapers.
Yeah.
Because I would say people are spending more money online than ever.
Yeah, but most of that market goes to Google and Facebook, right? So
why? Why don't those advertisers want to be on the New York Times and Wall Street Journal anymore, and they go right to Facebook and Google?
I think because Google and Facebook are better at providing advertising because of all the targeting technology and
so it's a more efficient ad spend.
Yeah, and they have a huge audience, of course, and they know their audience way better than a newspaper could. So I think that drives a lot of newspaper companies to subscriptions. That's not the reason why we chose to go ad free, because we principally don't believe in the ad model.
Got it.
So there's a difference there.
What's your plan for the U.S.? Why try to take on this insane market?
Right. So
because there's a lot of players in this market.
Yeah. But it's also a pretty big market, right? So from day one, we wanted to publish in English because we work with our readers. We try to cover developments that influence your life and societies. Most of the times, those are global developments, but all our members are Dutch. So we have a Dutch perspective on the world, and we always wanted to include as many people as possible in our journalism. So that's why we wanted to publish in English, and the US is, of course, the biggest English market. We have a pretty good network here, so that's why we decided to start a campaign here as well.
Is it going to be independent editorial from dcorrespondent.nl, or is it going to be the same writers and just translating them?
No, it's going to be a new newsroom.
New newsroom.
Yeah, of course, we're going to translate some of the stories, and we hope the two newsrooms will work together.
Got it.
For example,
where will the newsroom be based?
I think we'll probably New York.
Yeah.
But we will have correspondents all over the world and country. Yeah.
Cool. You were going to mention something about how you'll work together.
Yeah, we hope the two newsrooms are going to work together. For example, our correspondent in climate change in the Netherlands, if he has a big story now, he has to reach out to The Guardian and work with the editors there or the writers there. We hope to offer him the opportunity that he can work with colleagues from the correspondent newsroom. So they will work together. If you're a Dutch member, you'll get access to the English articles. You can also leave comments in the English section. So we really hope it's going to be a global platform at some point.
And what is the corporate structure? Are you guys a nonprofit, a B corporation, a for-profit? How do you look at that?
Right. So we are a for-profit company. We're a corporation because we believe journalism is not a charity and it should be sustainable. And we like the discipline that comes with customers, with having customers. At the same time, we've seen what profit maximization can do to journalism. It can hurt journalism.
Sure.
So we
were talking about it before, private equity specifically, right? Yeah.
So we came up with a 5% dividend cap, which makes us completely uninteresting for VCs or private equity.
Explain what the 5% dividend cap is.
We can never have more than 5% of our revenue go to dividends. We've never had dividends, and we probably won't have that for the coming decades, but we wanted to make sure we are uninteresting for investors who want to make 10 times their investment.
Got it. So if Silicon Valley investors are like, this is brilliant, I want to put in $1 million or $10 million, the most they could ever make is if the company made, $5 million in profits, they could make 5% of that.
Yep.
$250,000.
Yeah, so that makes us interesting.
No, $25,000.
Yeah, it makes us interesting for a different kind of investors.
No, $250. Yeah.
So we do have investors like Media Network, but they invest in us because it's a philanthropic investment firm. They invest in us because they believe in independent media.
Yeah, Omidyar is a purpose-driven, cause-driven investment on one side, and then they also do marauding capitalist investments, I believe, in their venture firm.
Yeah.
So you're part of their cause-driven group, I guess.
Yeah, and they still want us to be profitable, and they don't want to lose on their principle, of course. But they didn't invest in us for the profit's sake.
How do you execute on fact checking for somebody who doesn't understand what fact checking is? Most of the people in the audience, probably a very small percentage, have been the subject of an article at a company with actual fact checking. What number of publications actually do fact checking as such, have dedicated fact checking? Do you have dedicated fact checking? How do you look at the fact checking process? Because we're living in a world today, at least since Trump took office, where there doesn't seem to be truth. And the concept of objective truth is being thrown out the window. What you're seeing, our president said, is not reality. What the CIA and FBI and NSA and everybody said is not true. We have this contingent of our country that believes what he's saying, that nobody else can be trusted but what he says.
Right.
And obviously that's not factually correct, and that there's no objective one truth anymore. How do you look at fact checking and the search for the truth? What is the process that you use?
Yeah, I think the first step is there has to be a relationship of trust between journalists and readers. Because as I said earlier, you can fact check and you can make sure everything is correct and then publish it. But if 2/3 of the audience doesn't believe you, and the numbers are similar here in the US, then what's the purpose of fact checking? So establishing that relationship of trust between readers and journalists is what we're all about. So we are transparent about our editorial process. If you are a writer, you work with us, you share your story idea, and after that you are writing updates about your research, and you're open to questions. For example, if you interview someone, we ask that interviewee to also be part of the discussion and to correct things that are being said in the article that
so
they
that
don't agree with.
participation of the users is a key piece.
Yes. Yeah. And also
and building long-term trust is a big piece.
Yeah. And a big part of that is being accessible as a journalist. So participating in the comments, answering to criticism, inviting users to share more knowledge. And I think that is key in this whole challenge that we're all facing, is that the relationship of trust is being restored.
Do you have like a specific fact-checking department, or is each writer responsible for that fact-checking process?
Each writer is responsible for it. We have a lot of editors who check all the facts after that. There isn't the same fact-checking culture in the U.S. In the U.S., people are fact-checkers is like a full-time job.
Well, not really. There's only like a handful of publications that have that as a full-time job. A lot of it occurs the way you described, which is the journalist is responsible for the fact-checking.
Yeah, and then the
which is completely biased, right? Because the journalist is answering to nobody then. Shouldn't there be mandatory fact-checking?
Our journalists are answering to all the readers because we have a lot of experts.
Yeah, it's after the fact, though. But if you write something that's not factually correct...
Well, we then, if that happens, for example, which then a reader who's an expert in that topic can share it in the comments. It's visible to all the members. The journalist then has to respond to it.
Right, but that's all post the fallout of that that incorrect fact.
Yeah, but because we share our story ideas before you write the article, and because the whole process is visible, it happens. Oh,
they can see the story while it's being written?
Yeah, we share updates. Our correspondents have weekly newsletters, so you know what's happening. And you can, I think that's key in the whole process between readers and journalists, that you involve them before you publish the main story.
But why not have like an independent fact-checking group where they say, you know what? I don't answer to that journalist. I answer to the truth, and I read their story. And here are things where, they make statements that are opinions, not facts, or they're unsighted facts, or et cetera. Why not have an actual person? If you want to build trust.
Our editors do that. Right. So our editors
But wouldn't an independent fact-checking group be better? I don't understand why publications that are suffering from reputation damage, overall and specific, don't just say, we have a fact-checking department. Here they are.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Here's their notes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and I think that's one thing we can take from the American journalism culture, specifically for magazines, to have that job and to make it very visible.
Yeah. I think it was like one of the things I was most impressed with Wired, the Condé Nast publications, New Yorker and Wired, the 2 times, I was featured 2 or 3 times in those publications, and I had independent fact checkers who were calling me, and in one case, 2 different fact checkers for the same story. The New Yorker had 2 different fact checkers, and they were checking the same facts. So they must have been doing, I believe, some kind of double-blind fact checking,
Right.
which I thought was just amazing. Should journalists be able to have opinions and share them on social media?
Yeah, well, before I get to that, I think it would be great if journalists are more transparent about this. So as a reader of Wired, you probably don't know that there are 2 fact checkers checking those.
Well, that was the New Yorker, one for the fact check, one for Wired. But yes, same thing.
So I think journalists should be more transparent about these processes and explain it more to readers. Because as you just said earlier, most readers don't notice that it's being fact checked. So for objectivity in journalism, we don't believe in it because everyone has, as soon as you decide to write a story, as soon as you pick a story, you're not objective anymore. You made a decision, it's subjective. So we ask our journalists to be open about where they're coming from and what their biases are.
I want to hire, this would be my idea. You can have this one if you want it, but I would like to start a company that fact-checked the major stories of the day every day. And I don't know how you'd fund it because fact checkers cost $40 an hour in New York. Okay. Maybe they cost $20 in other places. So that's not cheap. That means like $75,000 a year for a fact checker in New York.
Yeah.
They might get paid $100 even. So let's say it's $100,000 in New York. Maybe you get somebody for $50,000 somewhere else, $75,000 in between, whatever. And they could fact check, I don't know, 2 stories a day. It might start costing you like $500 a story. It's too much money to spend per story, but if stories got fact-checked by some independent third party and they put their seal of approval on it, fact-checked by this, and then you actually had to click their notes. Oh, I got the domain name annotated.com specifically for this idea of annotating stories and then seeing that. But let's go on to, and by the way, I like your answers on all this. I think you're very considerate about this. I want to ask you specifically about journalists having opinions. For a long time, journalists were not allowed to share their opinions, who they voted for, their politics, whatever. Now, the New York Times has a writer, Sarah Jeong, I think is how you pronounce her name. You know about this controversy where she was saying white people are the worst, and then there was this whole race discussion that came from it. Would you allow one of your writers to write white people are the worst, white people are horrible, racist stuff like that, even if it's meant as cheeky, it still could be interpreted as racist. Would you, in this case, allow someone like that to write for you?
Well, I think that
if they were tweeting like that, and if not, how would you handle it?
Well, I think what's key in the whole objectivity versus subjectivity discussion is that we ask our journalists to be open about where they're coming from in their reporting. So if they cover Shell's actions in climate change, and they think it's weird that Shell had an inconvenient truth moment in the 80s, and then spent 2 decades lobbying against climate change activists, then you can call that as a journalist. You can say that you think that's an activity that should stop, because if you believe that and you don't include it in your reporting, then you have this fake objectivity. So what we expect from our journalists is that they share where they're coming from.
What if what they shared was something like, it's kind of sick how much joy I get out of being cruel to old white men and white people are the worst? What if they shared stuff like that? That is super polarizing. I'm not making a judgment on this here, but I'm asking you, because you care about the reputation of journalism, what would you do if one of your writers was writing that exact sentence on Twitter? Would they be allowed to work for you or not?
It's hard to say because there's so much context there that we had to research to come to a real good answer to that question.
Well, you must have followed this controversy. She's an Asian woman who's been harassed brutally online, and she got into it with people, and she seems to be of the belief that if you attack white people, it's not racist. If you attack white people for being white, because of the systematic oppression that has occurred in society and white people have not been oppressed, that it's okay to deride white people. Most people would say, you're probably better off not doing that, but I understand what you're saying, because white people have it easy. So, but how would you handle that specific situation?
Well, if I was in the process of hiring her, then I would have a conversation with her about this and ask her for explanations about these tweets. I haven't had a conversation with her, so I can judge on this. But what we do look for in journalists in general is that they are obsessed with the topic they're writing about, that they have a community around them, that of experts that trust them, and that they're...
Wouldn't this erode trust, though? Like if you said stuff like that?
Yeah, but then I can place those comments without having all the context. So I don't know for this specific case, but I have seen that if you are a journalist and you are open about what you think and you are answerable to those opinions and you take the time to explain them in a format that's longer than 140 or for what is it these days?
So do your journalists use Twitter regularly?
They do, yes, because it's a great way to reach out to their community.
Do any of them use it and say like Trump's an idiot or like God, Trump's the worst or like anything sort of opinionated like that? And if they did, if one of your journalists every day was just saying they hate Trump, they think he's an idiot and a liar, and they were just sort of that was their personal opinion, would that be tenable for you? And should journalists do that or not?
I think if a journalist believes that and they are that they should be open about that. I don't think you can disagree with Trump and hide that from your reporting.
No, what I'm saying is saying something a little bit more explosive, like he's an idiot. Like if one of your writers was writing like that, like a civilian might, that they think he's an idiot or he's an evil person. Like they said he was evil and stupid. Like,
right.
Character attacks. Would you allow your writers to write character attacks like that?
Well, I wouldn't encourage it, but I don't.
Why wouldn't you encourage it?
Because I would always, if you are a journalist and you are on Twitter, then you're still a journalist there. So I don't think character attacks are very productive as a journalist, and I would rather focus on actual laws that he's making and letting them comment on that in a factual and using facts and using arguments and not just shout all the time, because that's not very productive.
Yeah. Just so you know, the New York Times said, journalism and the fact that she is a young Asian woman have made her a subject of frequent online harassment. For a period of time, she responded to that harassment by imitating the rhetoric of harassers. I think that's kind of lame. She doesn't take ownership of her own behavior. She now sees that this approach only served to feed the vitriol that we too often see on social media. She regrets it, and the Times does not condone it. So then it's like, oh, we're sorry at the end. So clearly, I think from the people I've seen online, it's like, well, why would you give this person the opportunity to write the New York Times editorial page if this behavior is something she regrets and the New York Times is condoning? And I think the opposite position is, well, maybe she's evolved as a person and matured and realized that if you want to write for some publication that's supposed to be as trusted as the New York Times, you can't go calling people idiots or evil or, railing against people because they happen to be white. It's
also something you have to get used to, I think, that our whole history is visible online. And I understand why a lot of people are deleting all their tweets today, because it can always be used what you said. The things I said 5 years ago are not things I believe now, because I've evolved in my thinking.
I know. I couldn't believe what you said about the German soccer teams. That was incredibly cruel of you. When you said that they were completely incompetent and talentless. I can't believe the Germans allowed you to... I'm joking, he didn't say that. Back to you and the New York Times. I think it's just an interesting discussion because it's so prescient, and I don't really know Sarah, and so I'm sort of in the same position as you. I've just been watching this thing unfold, and I think it's like silly to say that kind of stuff and then try to be taken seriously. Like, I'm not a New York Times editorial page person, and I don't choose to be, but if I was, I would not be shooting off like that and saying racist stuff. Even if you don't think it's racist, it's easily considered racist by any intelligent person to pick out one group of people because they happen to be white and attack them. Anyway, what about the U.S.? How are you going to launch this in the U.S.? Do you have 60,000 paying people? Do you think people in the U.S. will go for this?
Yeah, that's what we want to find out, and we're gonna organize a crowdfunding campaign at some point, and because we want to be dependent on readers here as well. So in the Netherlands, 92% of our revenue comes from readers. we want that here as well, because we only have to answer to them. So, but to find those readers, we have to organize a crowdfunding campaign that costs money. So that's why we have investments from a media network to get there. And during that campaign, we'll talk about how we want to redefine news, because we believe news is broken, and it leaves you less informed, more cynical, and us all more divided. And we want to come up with an alternative. So that's what the campaign is all about. And we've asked people whose work we respect to become an ambassador of what we're doing. So our first ambassador is Jay Rosen. He's a press critic and he's a professor at NYU. And he has been writing about involving your audience for decades now.
Yeah.
He calls him.
I knew him from New York when I lived in New York in the 90s. Right. Very famous guy.
I remember a meeting with him a couple of years ago, and he said, "Oh, I love all your ideas." And then we said, "Well, half of them are yours," because we have always been reading him. So he's one of our ambassadors, and Nate Silver is also an ambassador. And together with them, we want to organize this campaign and tell people, if you are fed up with the influence news has on your life and on the societies, we want to build an alternative together. So be part of our movement. And if that crowdfunding campaign is a success, we will launch a couple of months after that with an American newsroom.
Should Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube ban Infowars, Milo Yiannopoulos, and other right-wing conspiracy theorists, provocateurs? Or should those people be allowed to publish so that we can all see how evil, insane, and/or stupid they are? In your opinion, Ernst. We're going to go through all these easy questions.
Yeah, thanks so much.
We're going through all the easy ones, but I want your personal opinion, Ernst-Jan Pfauth.
So what I think is that things like the Infowars are symptoms of something bigger. And,
which is?
Well, I think that it could be, for example, social inequality and people being frustrated with their lives and the lack of chances that they have. So what we aim to do with our news is try to uncover those structures, try to see what the core of all these problems and symptoms are.
Who do you perceive the people who Infowars appeals to? What is their axe to grind, if you were to think about it? Are these like people in the South who believe the country is being run by an African-American president and they just believe that the CIA is corrupt and Hillary Clinton's corrupt? And
yeah, well, I'm still getting to know the U.S., so I won't speak as an expert on the U.S.
This is a story you should do. You should figure out who are the people who actually believe what Infowars is saying.
Well, I think if I look at the Netherlands, for example, where we have like a right-wing party, the Freedom Party, and there are a lot of similarities.
That's aspiring branding.
Yeah,
the Freedom Party.
I think
you are all not free.
Right.
We will release you.
I think insecurity is a big problem. If you're not secure of your own safety, of your own perspective in life, you're gonna look for someone to blame. So I think that's a core.
That's what you think the right Freedom Party in the Netherlands is thinking. They believe that immigration will result in the watering down of Dutch culture, and they're scared of that.
Well, people who are insecure in their lives, they are looking for a scapegoat, right? That's there's a historic pattern for that. So as journalists, we should try to uncover that and look for a solution.
Did you cover that?
And not focus on symptoms.
Did you cover the influx of Islamic refugees and that issue in Germany, in the Netherlands, in the Scandinavian countries? Did you cover that? And what was the take on it? Because I know that this is very controversial in Sweden and some other countries where people who wouldn't normally consider themselves, they would consider themselves very liberal, but they might be anti-migration, right? So those two things can exist? Can you be a liberal person who believes in social change, et cetera, but be anti-immigration or for very modest immigration? What did you uncover?
I think one of the problems in journalism is that we're talking about people, but not with them. We're not talking with them. So one of the things we did was in the Netherlands, we organized the biggest group interview with refugees, I think in Western Europe. So what we did, we asked all our members, find a refugee in your city and make a connection with them, and we want you to interview them. So we're going to send you 3 questionnaires over the course of a couple of months, and you can ask them those questions, report back to us, and we're going to use that as a source for our reporting. So over 500 of our members applied, and they thought they were looking for partners, so they're looking for refugees, and they built up this connection with them, they interviewed them, and then we published a series of articles from the perspective of refugees and sharing lessons we learned from them, what they want from why they're here in the Netherlands, why that they want to go back, that if now that they're here, that they want a job, that's the most important thing. And by talking with those people instead of just about them, you're making it more insightful for everyone in the country who these people actually are.
I like that approach, because if you think about it, I like the approach. Some people, a cynic would say it's a little bit manipulative, because human to human, you're going to always have sympathy for an individual you meet, and that's just human, or empathy, or sympathy, any of those things. Yeah, both.
But
of those
I
things,
don't think that's a problem. I think
it is a problem if it would be bad for society to have unlimited immigration, and people meet one person and say, "Well, we should totally let everybody in," because that might be unsustainable. So an individual's emotional reaction to one microcosm. A cynical person might say, I'm not saying this, I'm just playing the role of devil's advocate here for the purpose of this conversation. Somebody might say, well, isn't that manipulative? Because one person is always going to have empathy for another person struggling, but we can't make policy based on you just meeting one person and feeling sorry for them.
Well, so there were 500 people interviewing those refugees, and I think empathy should be part of journalism, but it should. I mean, those group interviews shouldn't be the only thing that we do. So we also looked at the numbers, and the influx, for example, doesn't exist. The numbers aren't that high. So I think it's combining looking at the facts with a humane perspective.
Got it. So you're combining analytics and the big picture with the anecdotal to maybe give a fuller picture.
Yeah, I don't think anecdotal is the right word. I think empathy, a humane form of journalism.
Okay, sure. Yeah. I like that answer. One of the things I've been struggling with here in the United States when we talk about immigration is I ask people, well, what's the reasonable number of people that you would want to allow into the country each year? Mm-hmm. Nobody has an answer, because if I say to them, how many people were let in last year? Do you know how many people know? Nobody does.
Right.
And when Trump speaks, he just talks about how we just have MI whatever. Mm-hmm. What's the MI13? You give Emmy award-winning producer Jackie. Tell me who the criminals
guys with the tattoos on their
tattoos on their faces. Mike Tyson people. Yeah, whatever. No, they're not Mike Tyson. They're a specific gang, and the number of those gang members coming across the border, nobody knows that specific number. And so when you talk to somebody on the left and on the right, they don't actually know. Maybe it's MS-13. They don't actually know. MI6, right? The CIA in England. Nobody knows how many people are coming in or not. Everybody's completely uninformed. And then nobody has a reasonable proposal. So I think that what's happened in our insane journalistic world and what's happened with the political space is nobody wants to talk about an actual number. You could actually do this with an actual number. You'd say, we've allowed in 3 million people a year for the last 10. That equals 1% a year, because this is how they do it in Australia. They pick a percentage of the overall population, and then they allow certain people. And I think they do it based on merit there first, and then they do it on refugee status and everybody else lottery after that. I believe that's how they do it. That's how somebody explained it to me when I was there. But this would be a much easier way to do this if you actually just had a discussion of the numbers.
Yeah, so I don't know about the solution, but I do know about the problem you described, the fear mongering. So coming up with a gang that probably doesn't have a really big influence on the lives of most Americans, and then making that a national problem and the reason to close the borders. I think fear mongering is so effective because of the current news model. Because news now, as we know, it is about shocking, breaking news. It's about the incidents, about the things that grab attention. The clickbait that you mentioned in your intro. So that's why we are ignoring the news. Because if you ignore the news, you don't give a platform to this fear-mongering. You can look at the actual numbers, you can talk to the actual people, and give a better overview of what is actually happening in the country or in the world.
Yeah, when you look at it, we're talking about 10,000 people a month, 10,000 people a month probably crossing the border at the Mexico border here per year. It's not some insane number. And we could easily absorb it. I think that's one of the key issues we have to get to here. So when will you launch this crowdfunding campaign? At thecorrespondent.com.
We don't know yet. We're currently researching that.
Got it. So you're here on a fact-finding mission.
Yes, we work with NYU. We have a research project with them called the Membership Puzzle Project. And we look how our Dutch lessons apply to the US. And we also look at existing membership models here. And we work with Blue State Digital. That's a campaign agency that was also responsible for both President Obama's presidential campaigns. And they're helping us with strategy. And we're together with those two partners. We're picking a date, and we're also working with a creative partner called Momkai, which is a European agency. And I really believe that journalists should always have a developer and designer in the room, because if you're developing new ways of storytelling, a journalist can do that on their own, because they need a designer and a developer because they know all the new ways of storytelling. So that's why we have a creative partner with.
What do you think of this process journalism concept? You seem to do a little bit of process journalism behind the scenes, but some people believe if you get a rumor into your tip line, you publish the rumor and say, does anybody know if this is true? What do you think of that process? Of process journalism that TechCrunch and Gawker and some other folks seem to believe they were pioneering, which is, hey, you hear rumors, whatever people are talking about at the cocktail party, kind of talk about that in the blog, whether it's Gawker or TechCrunch or others. And I don't know if TechCrunch currently does this or not, but I know when other people were there, they were doing this form of process journalism, which we hear X, what do you know? And then people would then send in information. What do you think of that concept?
Well, we don't focus as much on individuals and individual scandals, so those aren't the rumors that we would publish about. But I do like because there's a lot of dangerous aspects of that. If you're just publishing rumors about individuals without doing the work yourself as much as you can do as a journalist before you publish it, that's obviously then you can serve someone's agenda who can just leak a rumor with you and then you publish it. What we try to do, though, is we do try to involve the audience from the start. So if there's, we do ask people, what's the thing you're most worried about in your life that should be on the front page? And then people don't mention individuals, but they mention, for example, the amount of bureaucracy in healthcare. So we ask them that on a societal level, on a system level, basically.
Is WikiLeaks virtuous, evil, the Russians, or some combination of those three things?
I don't know.
You really don't know? You don't follow WikiLeaks? You're in journalism, you don't follow it?
Well,
you guys must follow it, and it must come up all the time.
Yeah, well, I am following it, but I don't feel I'm an expert on it.
Okay.
So that's why I don't.
Well, what do you think about getting Julian Assange assisting, encouraging Chelsea Manning to give a huge data dump, which then he releases? Would you endorse that process, which he considers some kind of virtuous journalism because he practices it? Do you believe in people leaking and doing data dumps like that of confidential information, classified information specifically?
Yeah, I do believe in the value of whistleblowers, and if they uncover systematic problems, and we as journalists are taking all the measures we can take to make sure we're not publishing things that are threatening to someone's safety, then I think it's very valuable.
Which is exactly what he did. He published stuff in a large dump, and there were people who were put at risk. So then by your definition, you wouldn't agree with the process they use exactly.
No, I like the process more that you go to a journalistic outlet and then together come up with
Have you been the recipient of dumps like that from people, whistleblowers?
We've received things from whistleblowers. Yeah. I mean, the Shell example is obviously a great example.
Did they threaten to sue you if you release that, or post releasing it? Did they threaten to sue you?
So the legal system in the Netherlands is slightly different. The press is very well protected.
Well, we'd like to think that here too. Is it more so than even here?
Yeah, more so. Yeah.
So they didn't even attempt to sue you. They didn't even write you letters. They said, "You got it. You got it."
Not that I'm aware of.
Good.
Yeah.
So that's a big advantage to being in the Netherlands.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and that's what I'm a bit nervous about here.
Well, if it was 2 years ago, you wouldn't be nervous because we had great respect and freedom for it. But actually, even Obama was trying to find leakers and compel journalists to give over leakers. So Obama was part of the police state kind of approach to journalists. Like, I believe, I'll have to fact check this right now, but yeah, they were involved in wiretapping journalists to make sure they try to find their sources, which I'm not sure if that's fair play or not, but they were definitely trying to find the leakers within the government and punish them. That's fair for a government to do. If they catch people leaking, those people know that they're subject to the agreements they signed. That's fair play in your mind?
Yeah, that's also out of my my journalism expertise.
Yeah, it is a key issue because I think people don't understand what they're signing, and in some cases what you're signing may be overreaching, and in some cases it's not overreaching. If you're a military officer, like Snowden was, or
I think
Chelsea Manning, the idea that you can then go take stuff and give it away for free, that you signed a sworn oath to not share, kind of crazy. But I guess they both suffer the ramifications of it.
Yeah, and at the same time, if you believe that the system is broken and something should change, you could be a martyr and share it.
All right. Ernst-Jan Pfauth. You can follow him on the Twitter, EJPFAUTH. EJPFAUTH. The website is thecorrespondent.com, coming to the U.S. He's on the listening tour. If you care about journalism and you want to be a contributor to this fine, upstanding, aspirational brand, I highly encourage it, actually. I actually highly encourage it. I'd like to see more people trying to do, new models of journalism to protect democracy and to get the truth out there, because it's more important now. You can check out dcorrespondent.nl if you want to. And did I miss anything?
No, I think we covered everything from
more than you expected, probably.
Yeah, from the Russians to Mexican gangs. Yeah.
Do you cover Russia? Or have you covered Russia?
Well, we look at developments as global developments, so that we don't have a Russia desk, but there are a lot of developments that we cover that Russia takes part of. So that in that sense, we cover Russia. And
to be clear, Russia is a dictatorship and a murderous one at that.
I think
murdering people on the street of London and putting people in jail. What is your take, just personally, when you watch our president sucking up to Putin? You guys have the tape?
I think I saw a tweet that compared Putin to a PhD candidate and Trump to someone in kindergarten when it comes to global diplomacy. Yeah, and I thought that was a fitting metaphor.
Yeah, I don't think Trump understands exactly how in over his head he is with a KGB agent who might have compromat on him.
Yeah, it's a bit different than New York real estate.
Slightly different than dealing with the mafia in New York pouring concrete or casinos in New Jersey.
Yeah.
How do you think that all ends up? You think the Russians have compromat on him? What does your gut tell you? You think he's compromised? I think he's compromised.
You do?
I think he's compromised, but I don't think it's sex tape compromise.
What do you think it is?
I think the Russians were washing money. And I've gotten kind of like, because I know a lot of people who know people and people who are people. Let's just leave it at that. I think there's probably a large number of Russian transactions at Trump real estate projects that if they all were publicly out, people would say, well, that explains it. He's super pro-Putin because these projects were underwritten or these profits came from Russians either washing money, and I don't know any of this is fact. This is a theory. This is a theory, like a conspiracy theory kind of situation. Like if I was Columbo or a detective, just putting everything on the table, to be clear. But if you put everything on the table, the Russians tend to spread money around the globe. I believe when they put those, boxes of money out there, they're done like little time bombs or little Easter egg viruses that they can unload at any point in time. My guess is if we saw all those transactions, you'd look at it and go, oh, the Russians are a significant customer and funder of Trump, projects. Therefore, those oligarchs who answer to Putin told those oligarchs to spend that money. So Russian money, and Putin's probably got $200 or $300 billion. Probably hundreds of millions of dollars have been washed through the Trump organization, would be my theory.
Right. Well, there are a lot of excellent journalists researching the money flows of Trump now. So I think we'll know the answer eventually.
My guess is Mueller knows the answer right now. And I think there's like this Deutsche Bank loan and some other things that occurred that he probably has the information. Because if you look at Manafort as a microcosm, and as we're taping this, the Manafort closing arguments are going on Wednesday, August 15th, 2018. I guess we'll find out tomorrow if he was found guilty. That kind of Manafort stuff where money was being spent for favors and being washed and loans and all oligarchs, that seems to me to be directionally correct in terms of how they operate. I've had many times Russians, Chinese, and folks in the Middle East who wanted to meet with me to be LPs in my funds. I haven't taken any of that money to date. And I'm not saying all of that money is bad. Obviously, some of it's sovereign wealth funds. It's probably just fine. But because I don't have the ability to know where that money comes from, and I was in a meeting with a fund of funds. You know what that is? Fund of funds in the venture community?
No.
So a fund of funds is somebody puts together $2 billion from a group of LPs, limited partners, and that could be Saudis, it could be Chinese, it could be Russian money, who knows? Then they put it into a pool, and then they distribute that pool to people like myself who invest in high growth companies.
Right.
We don't know who's in that pool.
Right. So that's the concept.
Our startups don't know who's in our pool. So you have multiple blind pools, and who knows what's behind the fund of funds pool. There might be a pool that somebody in China put together that includes Russian and Saudi money or UAE money, whatever it is. And they just say, yeah, we've got a pool of capital. We've got $1 billion here from a number of LPs. We want to put it into your fund of fund. Then the fund of fund takes a little taste. The VC takes a little taste. The startups get a little taste. And then all of a sudden you might have some person whose money you wouldn't take directly has been washed twice to get into one of these funds. And I had a fund of funds, I won't say which, obviously, who was interested in giving me money to put to work. And I said, oh, tell me about your LPs. And they were very opaque. And then I said, well, do you have any Chinese families? I said, yes, we have 2. I said, great, who are they? They said, we can't tell you. I said, okay, do you have any money from the Middle East? They said, yes. I said, from where? They said, Saudi Arabia, one family. I said, who? I can't tell you. They have a confidentiality agreement. So then it was up to me, if they were to offer money, I'm not saying if they did or they didn't, to then say, do I want to have some percentage of that? And it would have been under 5% of the money would have come from those sources. So together, those 3 families would be like 1% each of the fund, probably. They probably put $50 million in each or $100 million each of a $5 billion fund of funds or a $10 billion fund of funds. Who knows what it is? So that's sort of interesting how money moves around.
Yeah.
And my gut tells me the Russians put a lot of money to work through those Trump Tower projects, loans, any number of things. And that's why Trump a lot of times telegraphs stuff. He was like, there's a red line. If you cross it, if Mueller goes into my personal finances, that's the red line. And he said, oh, I'm under audit, so I can't give you my tax. Well, the audit would be over by now. So why can't we see his taxes? We can't see his taxes, and we can't see, and he said there's a red line there because there's stuff in there that I think would be either illegal, immoral, or intolerable to Americans, including Republicans.
Right. Follow the money.
Follow the money, that's what they said. On that note, Ernst-Jan Pfauth from Amsterdam, which is in the Netherlands,
Very good.
which makes you Dutch.
Yes.
I'm just clearing that up for people because I have people saying people who are Dutch are from Denmark.
Yeah, it's complicated.
Copenhagen's in Denmark, and those people are called?
Danish people.
Danish people.
Yes.
Danish people are not Dutch people. Dutch people are from the Netherlands. So this is just a little geography
Thank you
primer for everybody. It does happen all the time, right?
Yeah.
People are like, oh, the Netherlands, is that near Amsterdam? And you're like, yes, it is near Amsterdam.
Yeah.
It's Amsterdam.
I actually never say that I'm from the Netherlands. I always say I'm from Amsterdam. It's easier. Yeah,
Yeah,
everyone
that's what
knows
we do.
Amsterdam.
We're like, we're from New York. It's like, oh, you're from the United States? I'm like, no, I'm from Brooklyn. Brooklyn's in the United States, Jason. That's how we used to say it. All right, listen, continued success. Everybody check out thecorrespondent.com. How do you get a job there? If your best advice is somebody who wants to work for you.
Email me, ej@thecorrespondent.com.
ej@thecorrespondent.com. You heard it here first. Go get your jobs. There literally are no jobs for young journalism people. I was meeting with somebody who was applying for a position with me. Mm-hmm. They said they'd done a bunch of freelance work. I said, oh, where? The Huffington Post, San Francisco Chronicle, this place, that place. I said, oh, how much you get paid? $75 for a 500-word piece or 1,000-word piece from, $100. Like, wow. You did that for a living? I was like, how many pieces you file a week? Like 5 or whatever. It's like, so you're making like $500 a week. It's like, it's pretty tight living.
Yeah.
We pay $22 an hour US for inside.com, I believe. Mm-hmm. I believe that's the number for freelancers. We used to put out ads for $15 an hour and get 500 people apply. Then we put it at 22. We get more people applying. There are no journalism jobs out there.
Right.
It is bonkers.
We hope to create some.
I think and people who take those jobs are taking a vow of poverty, essentially. It's like being a priest or something. You're taking a vow. I always tell that to people. Like, if you want to go into journalism, really, like you're spending $150,000 on your degree to get a $40,000 a year job. You better be careful. Like, get a scholarship or something.
Yeah.
Will it ever be a high-paying job, you think? Can it ever be a high-paying job? Do you think about that with your platform, saying like, hey, maybe...
Yeah, well, it can be high-paying in the sense that if you have a successful book, for example, we publish our own books. We pay our authors 50% more royalties than normal book publishers in the Netherlands.
So the people who write for you can do a book, and then they can make an extra 50 grand or 100 grand or something from that?
Yeah, it depends on the success. We also did speaking...
What was the most somebody got paid? You think?
I don't know specifically, but our best-selling books sold 60,000 copies.
What?
Yeah.
Hardcover?
Paperback, yeah. We don't have
paperbacks, so you make $5 each, $4 each. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
you chop that up with the writer, so that's like a great bonus for them. And then speaking gigs, they can do speaking.
Yeah,
gigs.
but we stopped doing that because it's too distracting for journalists.
It is. Yeah. And by the way, I do speaking gigs too. The independents get screwed up, so I'm getting asked to do speaking gigs now, and it's hard to turn down. Although I do turn it down, I get like 30 grand or something, plus travel to go places, and I get a lot of these offers, and it's like, oh, well, am I going to be compromised by having taken that? Now, if it's a conference and they're selling tickets, who cares? Like, if they're selling $5,000 tickets, they sell 6 tickets, it pays for me. I'm a headliner. But so I probably sell 10 tickets, or I might sell 50 tickets. Who knows? It's It's net profitable for them if I come speak in one of those markets. But if it's a corporation, then like if you had one of your people, what if they get paid $50,000 to go speak at Shell?
Yeah, so we had this whole list of rules, and it was very complicated. Then we decided let's not just do it.
The book is the way to go. And then any podcasting efforts yet or no?
Yeah, we have a lot of podcasts. Yeah.
I really like this podcast that my friend Sam Harris is doing. Have you listened to Sam Harris's Waking Up podcast?
No, I listened to some interviews with him, though.
Yeah, he's a really interesting cat, a good friend of mine. But anyway, what he does in his podcast is he does a 7-minute opening, which he tells people they can skip, where he explains why he doesn't read mattress ads, and how if he read a mattress ad, you might think less of him, and that he doesn't want anybody, since he's talking about race, gender, intelligence, religion, all the, atheism, Islamic terrorism, all this like crazy third rail stuff. He just doesn't want to have any sponsors getting phone calls and attacked.
Right.
So he's gone all contributions.
And is it successful?
Massively.
Okay.
Massively successful. I think he's probably the most successful of any podcaster in this regard. All right. Thanks for coming on, Ernst.
Thanks for having me.
Great meeting you. Everybody else, October 10th and 11th, Launch Scale. And that's our event here in San Francisco, free for 1,000 founders. But here's a special announcement. Launch and Seed Invest have joined forces again. This is the second or third year we've done it. I think it's the third time we've done it, actually. And we're going to do live investing. Speaking of crowdfunding, we're going to do live investing. That's right. 5 startups who are actively raising on the Seed Invest platform, which Inside.com just finished a very successful crowdfunding. We did $2.6 million. A little bit more than yours.
Yeah.
But that's because I'm a rabid capitalist and we're going to try to return people 10 times their money.
Right.
Hopefully at least. Maybe 5, maybe double. Who knows? We're going to try hard. But this really works. Crowdfunding works, I know, because we just did it. And we did it on Seed Invest, which is really the best platform for doing it, I think, right now. Seed Invest will, those 5 startups will receive feedback from myself and Ryan from Seed Invest and one other investor in a mentoring session. To apply and learn more, go to launchscale.net/crowdfunding, launchscale.net/crowdfunding, where you can learn more about getting one of those 5 coveted live crowdfunding spots on stage. And the people in the audience will be able to actually invest in the companies live. It's going to be amazing. With that, I'll thank Emmy Award-winning producer Jackie and Tony, the amazing new director here. If you've been wondering how we get everything so amazing, the audio, the video, the lighting, everything's leveled up thanks to Tony, my new director. I love Tony. Director Tony has leveled up the entire organization. Okay, we'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.